Molly Gray, and I'm running for Lieutenant Governor. I think the first thing that we have to recognize is that Vermont really has done a tremendous job in responding to COVID-19. We've largely relied on our medical health professionals, our scientists to guide our response, be it from wearing masks to relying on quarantine and keeping our families and communities safe. So I think our biggest challenge moving forward is how do we continue to work towards getting a vaccine? How do we, whether we have a mandate or mask, encourage all Vermonters, although I support a mask mandate, to wear masks with a recognition that we're all on the same team, and that helps us in terms of our schools reopening and our businesses reopening. It's ensuring that we have access to health and safety information for all Vermonters through investments in broadband and internet access, and making sure that all public health and safety information is available to all of our communities, regardless of first language, making sure our new Vermonters have access, and that we're providing personal protective equipment to our childcare providers, our educators, and everyone else. Here in Vermont, we continue to see more deaths than births in a majority of Vermont counties. One reason I'm running for Lieutenant Governor is because we haven't figured out how to solve our demographic challenges. And I see solving our demographic challenges as also linked to a bright and prosperous economic future for Vermont. If we can figure out how to keep a generation here, or draw a generation back, or simply draw a generation to Vermont to expand our tax base, through strategic investments we can make right now in broadband and internet access, for example, in childcare, in paid family and medical leave, basically the constellation of economic opportunities and investments that will really put people, communities, and families at the forefront and help us grow our demographics so we have an expanded task base and will be more viable for the future. I grew up on a vegetable and dairy farm in Newbury, Vermont, and my folks still farm there today. We grow food for the community. So I'm pretty well acquainted with taking care of our lands and the value of our lands and providing for our communities. What we know from COVID-19 is that we've distributed 500,000 meals ready to eat to Vermonters. And we knew that we had a lot of food insecure communities and families before COVID-19. So I see this as one of our greatest opportunities to think about a diversified, local agricultural economy that really galvanizes the hundreds of young farmers and food producers we have around the state and sets Vermont on a more food secure path, not only in the face of COVID-19, but in the face of climate change. And as we think about a really resilient, sustainable, economically viable Vermont for the future. Climate change is one of the greatest threats to Vermont. If we think about our sugar makers, we think about health, we think about our farmers, we see the impacts of climate change every single day in our livelihoods, in our families, in our communities. What I think we've failed to do as a state is take the type of a bold, strong action and leadership that we need, be it on a Global Warming Solutions Act that holds Vermont accountable and makes Vermont a leader in helping communities, investing in solar, investing in weatherization, both investing in economic opportunity through investments in those types of programs and workforce development, but also thinking about ways that we can protect Vermonters, our livelihoods, and make participation in a climate resilient Vermont equitable, transparent, and possible throughout our state. Yes, throughout our systems, both education, housing, employment, we see the impact of systemic racism. We see mass inequity. I also believe that we see it within our criminal justice system. I think Vermont in many ways has been a leader on criminal justice reform. We've invested in restorative justice and community justice centers. We also have a very strong history of being a leader in civil rights. But in this moment, I think we haven't done a good enough job in identifying where racism exists through the collection of data, and thinking about how we can reform our laws to create greater accountability, be it around the use of force and prevention, or through looking at our education system and housing. So this is a moment for us to think about everything anew, to be bold, to be inclusive, to recognize that diverse communities are strong communities, and a diverse democracy is a healthy democracy, and think about all the ways that we can unpack our systems and address racism wherever it occurs. As an assistant attorney general who serves statewide as a prosecutor, I'm intimately aware of where we can do better and we can do more as a state. We've had more officer-involved shootings in Vermont in the last year and a half than we have in the last 5 years, as I understand it. We see an uptick in the collection of data that also suggests that we may have challenges around bias policing. We've invested heavily in incarceration, but not in prevention. So I see this as a moment where we need to review our use of force standard, to expand the apertures that we have prosecutors who can look at where police may not have used de-escalation tools to the best of their advantage, to invest in training, to invest in making sure all of our officers have body cameras, and they've been asking for them, to ensure that that happens, but also to think about how can we invest in prevention, either as individuals come out of our correctional facilities or to prevent run-ins with the criminal justice system to begin with, through investments in mental health and support services, in education, in workforce development, and meeting the basic human needs of Vermonters upstream rather than making those downstream criminal justice investments or incarceration investments later. Access to the internet in 2020 should be no different than access to electricity or plumbing or water. I think we would be outraged in 2020 if we imagined a fourth of Vermont geographically not being able to access water or plumbing. And today, 1/3 of, or 1 in 3 children in Newberry, where I grew up, still can't get online. We've seen the impact of a lack of access to broadband or internet on access to remote work, to online learning, to telemedicine, access to telemedicine and health, access to economic opportunity. So this is one of the greatest investments I believe we can make, and we absolutely have to make right now, through utilization of the CARES Act and federal funding, through strong supports for our communication union districts around the state. We know that we built I-89 in something like a year, right? And that was the highway of the future. Internet is the highway of our future. And we can do it if we commit to it and really put our rural communities, our families, our children, and economic opportunity at the forefront as we think about moving forward from COVID-19. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because I'm deeply focused on helping us solve our demographic challenges and coming out of COVID-19 stronger. If we continue to promote or elect the same people, we'll see the same outcomes. This is a moment where we get to think about everything anew, from investments in childcare and paid family and medical leave so we can take care of our older Vermonters and our children and pay the bills, to think about investments in our state colleges. So our students, which we have the highest graduation rate in the country, yet something like 41% of students don't go on to any further education in Vermont. Think about workforce development, higher education, to think about food security and investing in a diverse agricultural economy. This is our moment to think about the future that we want for our state, one that's prosperous, that's welcoming, that's innovative, that's entrepreneurial, and that's really sustainable through COVID-19, through climate change, and through a world that's changing every single day.